fare sharing actually went backwards today. There were 2 announcements today, and I honestly am getting sick of listening to myself burst the good news bubble because I keep doing it. But the government...
Because you don't like good news.
Because no, of course, I don't like good news.
Well, I mean, there's some good news.
Would you stop? Okay, look, there were 2... Let me explain.
Damien, please just let me explain.
Let me explain.
Try, do your best.
It'll be hard though, but I'll try.
Yeah, I know.
There were 2...
Try very hard.
There were 2 relevant announcements today. The first was we will hopefully get an extension on the payback period for this money from the EFSF. That's worth about 50 million a year. 50 million a year is welcome. It's 50 million in reduced borrowing.
That's untrue.
But it's not a lot of money. It's about 50 million a year. The second announcement, which Noonan made today, which has not made the headlines, is on the real negotiation, which is the ESM recapitalisation of the banks. Noonan admitted today that the risk taken on through the recapitalisation would remain with the sovereign. In the July 2012 announcement, remember the 4 a.m. announcement? They said, fantastic news.
Seismic shift.
The ESM, this is the game changer, the ESM will recapitalise the banks. Great news. Except the German finance minister came out the next day and said, sure, but the risk associated with the banks in every country will stay with the country. Now, I and Damien and everyone else said, oh no, it won't, because we have to share the burden. Now, Noonan today said, actually, it will. So the big negotiation was on the ESM. And the bad news there was, yeah, actually, we're not going to get what we thought we'd get. We're going to get what the Germans said we'd get the day after the announcement. By the way, on this other thing, I've managed to get us 50 million a year. So that's what happened today. It was very good media manipulation in terms of bury a really bad news story behind a small good news story.
Yeah, I would agree with Stephen that it's a huge PR exercise, and that's about what's been happening for the last year or so. Really what we're doing is softening up the Irish people to bailout number 2. That's basically what's happening. So the plan all the way from Europe, we've talked about it for years on this show, is going exactly how the Europeans wanted to go, and it hasn't deviated at any point in time. We're just playing around with the PR side of things. So what they're saying is, your debt is unsustainable, Portugal's debt is unsustainable, so we're going to do something, we're going to throw you a bone of some description. And that's what they do every single time that we go along. So for the government to say that, they said we wouldn't have a second bailout, this is basically what they're doing. So they're going to try and stand behind us in all different ways. We won't even go into the complicated ways, but it might save us a little bit of money. Yeah, I mean, definitely will save us a bit of money. And so obviously the government can claim that it's somewhat good news. But you can't take this as good news, because the financial institutions around Europe have really played Ireland for fools, the Irish people for fools, and they're continuing to play this same thing for the European population as well. Damien says, and I've heard Brian Hayes going on about this today as well, Fine Gael have some way brought our debts or our yields on our debt down from about 14% to 4%. It's something to do with them. It's absolutely nothing to do with what is happening in the domestic economy, and it's nothing to do with our government. What the central banks have done is they've flooded the whole world with cash, and traders are doing exactly what they did in 2007, and they are taking this money and they are betting on everything that moves. That's why you've seen food prices go up, you've seen oil prices go up, the stock market's at a 5-year high, bond yields across the world and every single thing you can buy are falling. And the reason being is because they're allowed to gamble with absolutely every bit of cash that the Europeans are shoving into the banking system. So it's nothing to do with the Irish people, it's nothing to do with the European people, it's not going to help. But what it does help is lots of bond traders, and it helps lots of financial institutions.
And Paul, I'm sure a lot of our viewers are like me and don't really quite understand what you're saying. Just go through that again.
Okay, well, basically, what
they want a loan to somebody.
What the central banks around the world are trying to do is, obviously, they're a bit like Fine Gael, actually. They're trying to create PR. So they want everybody to be in a good mood. How do you get into a good mood? You have to push the stock market up, especially in the States. So what they need to do is they need to flood the market with money. Now, normally what you would do...
How does that put up the stock?
Well, I was just about to tell you. So what sometimes would happen in previous years would be you give it to the banks would lend it out to people, you might have some sort of a boom. But in this sort of circumstances, the banks don't want to lend to the real economy in any country, including Ireland. So what did they do? They tried to buy financial assets. So what would they do? What would they bet on? What's the safest bet? Government bonds. Do you know why? Because they want to tie the banks again right into the sovereign in every country. So you've got Italian banks, for an example. They are betting billions on Italian bonds. That's all they're doing. Do you know why? They're sitting back and they're making a fortune. And if it goes wrong, what's going to happen? The ECB is going to bail them out. Exactly the same all over Europe. So please don't tell us that the bond yields in Ireland have gone from 14% to 4% because it's anything to do with the domestic economy. It has nothing to do with the domestic economy. And this is where the problem lies. Ireland, we keep thinking we're getting deals of some description. The only reason the Europeans are turning around to us now and giving us this is because they're very afraid that the Irish people or the Portuguese people or the Greek people are going to do something about it. So they've got to throw you a bone every so often to keep you down. So this is exactly how the system works. And the financial industry is absolutely like drinking champagne on the back of everything that is going on at the moment. And the bond traders in particular, they're just gambling on everything, more derivatives than 2007. And when there is a bond problem, like all the things Stephen's talking about here, is we are saying that we're getting a deal. And that is saying that in a couple of years' time there won't be a problem in the bond market, because our loans are going to be associated with the loans, the benchmark loans. I would suggest that in a couple of years' time there's going to be a huge problem with the bond market.
Somebody told me yesterday that there are more people now betting on contracts for difference than there were at the height of the boom.
In Ireland or in the world?
In the world.
In the world, I'm not sure about in the world just contracts for difference, but if you take derivatives as a whole, yeah, absolutely that is the case.
Yeah. Just one other point before we go back to the others, and it's this. You said that that we're saving some money by the deal, by the deferral of the debt. I don't understand that. Michael Noonan himself compared the arrangement that we've come to as similar to an extension of a mortgage. And if you extend your mortgage from, say, 10 years to 20 years, yes, the payments are less now, less next year than they were previously. But the overall price, the overall cost of the mortgage goes up significantly.
No, you're getting confused about two different things. That's the promissory notes. Yes, the overall cost would go up of the promissory notes if we put them out further along. And again, just on that point is, one of the main things which I would be against is, what we're going to do is we're going to move them from promissory notes into sovereign debt. So I know that we still have that argument, is it sovereign debt? Most people say now it is sovereign debt, but we'd be absolutely making that crystal clear that our grandchildren are going to be paying that. But where he's saying that we're going to save some money would be on the other loans, and he is correct that if we would to be pushing it out and to be getting a lower interest rate, because basically what they would tie it in usually to the benchmark rates in Europe, which would probably be lower over time, we would save some money.